Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rutgers Alumni Association presentation. Today, I will be presenting the bugs and the bees and why the world needs insects. All right, before I get started, I want to just tell you a little bit about myself. So as a child, I loved playing outside, and this passion stayed with me all through to this day. And as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, I knew it was important to find something that I would love to do for the rest of my life. And that's when I pursued my degree, my bachelor's degree in environmental science. And I found out that you can actually be an adventure scientist. And these photos here were taken along a clean water expedition where I had the opportunity to travel along with a small group of people down the Mississippi River on kayaks from Chicago all the way down to New Orleans. And we got to meet loads of people along this trip, and we got to learn all about how these small towns on waterways were impacted by their water. And that water is impacted by things that humans and nature do to it. So without further ado, let's get into some insects. So I am currently pursuing my PhD in entomology, which is the study of insects. And what I'm most particularly interested in is honeybees. And there are scientists all over the world, hundreds of scientists that are all working together. They're trying to figure out what's happening to our bees, to our honeybees and other pollinators. And I'm doing my part in contributing just a little tiny piece to the puzzle in helping to understand what is causing the declines in our bees. So what's all the fuss about this bee stuff anyway? Why do people care about pollinators? Well, if you like fruits and vegetables as much as I do, then you will be happy to hear that your fruits and vegetables are most of them are actually from and the cause of insects, pollinators. Honeybees and other insects are responsible for pollinating flowers that allow us to grow big, delicious, juicy fruits that we know of today. Now, I posted a couple big photos of some of my favorite fruits that honeybees are responsible for pollinating. We have almonds in the top left, blueberries on the bottom left, cranberries on the top right, and strawberries in the bottom right. Yes, honeybees are responsible for pollinating these, among other insects. But that's not all. There are quite a few, too many to name, in fact. We actually have a third of our food is given to us through pollination by insects. So what does that leave? Well, the other 2/3 of our food leaves us with a little bit more of a bland taste in our mouths. We have rice and wheat and barley, oats and rye, and corn, to name a few. These ones are pollinated by the wind. The wind actually blows the pollen and allows those plants to make that delicious food for us. But that's not a whole lot that you can enjoy when you're excluding all of our fruits and vegetables that are pollinated by our insects. So what are some other insect pollinators? We have Hymenoptera, which are honeybees and wasps. We have our Diptera, which are flies. Yeah, flies can pollinate too. Lepidoptera, which many of you are already well aware of, the butterflies and moths that pollinate. We also have the Coleoptera, beetles, Thysanoptera, and Hemiptera, extinct bugs. Yes, they help pollinate our food. Insects are hexapods, and hexapods means 6-footed. So if you can count the legs on the critter that you're seeing and it has 6 legs, then you've got an insect on your hands. Now, insects aren't the only pollinators. We also have bats and hummingbirds, birds, lizards, mice, and other marsupials that also help to pollinate our flowers. So why honeybees? Well, besides the fact that they're cute and cuddly and sweet and give us delicious honey, they're pretty easy to move around. A colony of bees lives in a hive, which can then be moved around from location to location. And beekeepers do this all year, every single year, to help ensure that we have the delicious foods that we know, love, and enjoy. So this is called the Great Pollination Migration. Yes, thousands, millions, billions of honeybees get loaded up on these trucks, which are then drive across the country pretty much all year round, delivering these honeybees from farm to pollinate their crops. So in February, they start off typically in California in the almonds, where they pollinate thousands of acres of almonds. Then from there, they start to move further south where it's warm and the honeybees like to fly. And they pollinate things such as cherries and citrus down in Florida. And then they continue up the East Coast as it gets warmer. And into May and June, they'll pollinate our blueberries here in New Jersey and our cranberries. And that's not it. They'll pollinate apples and melons and alfalfa out back Midwest. So once they're finished along the East Coast, the rest of North America, of the United States, is warm enough for them to then pollinate the crops that are blooming there. And they'll go across the country where a lot of the honeybee hives will be unloaded in Montana and Utah and places up north where they'll spend just a couple months in the winter to kind of take a quick little break before the whole cycle starts over again in February. Now in the photo on the top right-hand side, you can see thousands of hives stacked up upon each other, which are then moved by our great, very brave truck drivers that drive these billions of bees from farm to farm. And they unload these trucks with this sweet little, you can see in the bottom right-hand image, this is like a forklift, and it's called a Hummer-Bee. And those things are very powerful because these hives can be a couple 100 pounds per pallet. So it's a big work, heavy duty job. And it's something that a lot of us don't realize when we eat our fruits and our vegetables that are pollinated by our honeybees. We don't realize how much work goes into making that fruit and getting that honey. So big round of applause and big thanks to our beekeepers that do this year in and out. So what makes them so easy to be stored in a box and then taken around the country? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I would want to just go into a beehive and throw them in a box and walk off with them. Well, over hundreds of years, humans have actually domesticated the honeybee in a way that allows us to use them for pollination like we do today. And that's because honeybees are social insects. They live in a colony, and this colony can be kept in a box, like you saw in the photo previous, and you'll see some more later on. So in that colony, there are thousands of girl bee workers. There's a couple of boys most of the year, and there's just one single queen. Now that queen lays hundreds of eggs in a single day. And then it takes 3 weeks for that little egg to hatch, grow into a larva, then pupate, and then emerge as an adult bee. When that adult bee emerges, her wings aren't strong enough to fly around to go gather her honey and pollen for her colony yet. No, she's got other tasks that she's responsible for. That's right, child labor. So she will emerge from her cell and immediately start cleaning the house. She will clean, help repair the damaged waxy combs that they live in. She'll help clean up poop, and she'll help feed the queen. That's right, the queen doesn't feed herself. She has thousands of little nurse bees that help take care of her and groom her so she's nice and clean and well taken care of. So all the queen has to do is lay eggs. So honeybees, to my knowledge, are one of, if not the most hygienic insect, if not organism that we know today. They are incredibly clean and they have to be that way because if their hive gets dirty, then they could all die. They're very susceptible to diseases and outside bacteria if it starts to build and grow inside their hives. So they stay nice and clean. So we are the first ones to know about honeybees. I mean, they've been around for thousands and thousands of years. Honeybees are even told in some stories of the Greek and Roman gods. I picked a couple just to tell you guys, little snippets, but you're welcome to look into them more if you're more interested in them. So Zeus, one god that I think is fairly familiar to most of us, was actually as a baby, he was smuggled into a cave by his mother, who was trying to hide and protect him from his father, who wanted to destroy him. His father was Kronos. At the time, he was the king of all gods. Well, Zeus lived in that cave with a bunch of sacred honeys, and they fed him honey every day until he was a man. And when he became a man, an adult, he emerged from that cave. He dethroned his father, Kronos, king of gods, and became the new king of gods, Zeus, as we know him today. One of his other names was actually Melisios, which means bee man. Another story is that honeybees were considered the birds of the muses. Muses were goddesses of all the fancy and lovely things in life, of art, poetry, and science. So the muses gave gifts of eloquence to humans by sending bees to place honey on the human's lips. And this would make their voices sweet. Not only that, but honeybees even appear in stories of the underworld, where honeybees were thought to be reincarnations of human souls. And the queen of the underworld was also called Melicotes, which means the honey one. Displaying a symbol of the honeybee on one's clothing or on buildings was a way to show royalty. But when most people think of bugs, they don't really think royalty, do they? No. Oftentimes, when people think of insects and bugs, they think of crop pests. They think of the worms inside their apples and the little critters that chew up their vegetables so that they're growing in their backyard. And yes, it's true. There are a good amount of insect pests out there. In fact, they've been plaguing humans for hundreds of years. In the photo in the bottom right-hand or the bottom left-hand corner of the slide here shows an old newspaper article where a swarm of locusts, grasshoppers, came into a village and destroyed. They ate up all of their crops, and that village would starve if they didn't have any food for the winter. So insects have been a problem for a pretty long time, and humans have been trying to find ways to live with these insects and still be able to create enough food to sustain a human population so we don't all starve. So that's when pesticides started coming about and started being used pretty regularly. Pesticides have saved thousands, if not millions, of human lives. Trucks were used to spray an insecticide known as DDT on beaches, playgrounds, and in neighborhoods to protect children from mosquitoes, which can transmit deadly diseases. And because of these diseases, mosquitoes are still the #1 cause of human deaths to this day. Before trucks, wagons were pulled by horses to spray crops with insecticides to ensure that humans would have plenty of food. Today, pesticides are still used to kill insects, weeds, and rot-causing fungi. Only we've given the horses a rest, and now we use large tractors and even airplanes to apply our pesticides. In terms of protecting human health and ensuring we have plenty of food, pesticides are still an essential way of life all across the globe. But there are other unintended consequences of pesticides. Killing insects includes killing some of our best pollinators, which are responsible for providing us with the delicious food that we know and enjoy today. In the photo on the right, you can see white pesticide residue on a plant, which was being actively foraged by a honeybee circled in red. Yes, pesticides, when not used properly, can mess with Mother Nature. The same insecticide, DDT, which was responsible for saving countless human lives, is also responsible for destroying bird populations because it made the shells of bird eggs weak, too weak to support the parents' weight. Therefore, when the parents of these eggs would come and sit upon them to keep them warm, the eggs often cracked, killing their unborn young. Our national icon, the bald eagle, was one of these unintended victims. There are other farm practices that have contributed to the loss of fertile soil, but luckily today we have laws that protect our environment and prevent such catastrophic losses. So bugs aren't all bad. That's right. Bugs are beautiful and they contribute to all the beauty in our nature. In some caves in New Zealand, there's actually glow bugs that light up caves on the inside, and you can walk in them and you can see them in a dark cave be lit up by insects glowing. There's beautiful insects like the orchid mantid, the pink one in the center of the slide here. There's lightning bugs, which I like to call the glitter of nature. There's cicadas and katydids. These contribute to the beautiful symphonies that you hear outside in the warm summer months. And there's beautiful butterflies of all shapes and sizes that flitter around to help remind you how wonderful our life is. There's beneficial insects that actually eat those crop pests we were talking about before, like ladybugs. Yeah, they eat pests, so they're really good for our environment. And then there's also things like dragonflies that just are so incredible. They can actually fly almost as fast as your car can go, like 60 miles an hour. So don't think you're going to be able to outrun a dragonfly. But bugs also bring color and texture to our world. Without silk bugs, there would be no silk, like the beautiful dragon kimono that you see in the top left picture. There's the Indian Lassiperlaka bug, which secretes a compound known as lac, which is used to stiffen felt hafts, stiffen hair in hairspray. It's used as glue to make light bulbs, and to polish floor, and it's even used to polish food like apples and jelly beans. That's right. Not only that, but there's also other bugs out there, like the cochineal carmine. That is actually a scale insect. Those little white specks that you see on that prickly pear cactus on the top right picture of the screen, that's a scale insect. And that can suck the life out of a prickly pear cactus. But humans have found a way to safely extract this beautiful red dye, which is edible, and it's actually used in lots of foods like ketchup and red smoothies and yogurts and all types of things that I'm sure you've had a taste of without knowing you were eating an insect or a piece of one. Not only do they bring color and texture to our life, but the decomposing insects complete the cycle of life. So when all of the things that we know and love and enjoy in our world, when their time in this life comes to an end and they die or they poop, all that stuff has to go somewhere, right? We're not living around with a bunch of dead plants and poop. No, we have insects that specialize in chewing and breaking down those trees and plants and even poop. Yeah. And they use it to nurture and nourish their young. Also, another fun little historical story. is the scarab, which is the Egyptian symbol for good luck, which symbolizes rebirth, regeneration, and transformation. They believed that the sun was actually pushed across the sky by a scarab beetle, similar to the way that dung beetle is pushing across his poo in the right hand picture. Not only that, but insects have superpowers. Yes, so they are masters of camouflage. Can you see the stick insect, the walking stick bug, in the left-hand picture? And it's hard, but there's an insect. That's not two sticks there. That's actually an insect crawling upwards. How about the moth in the center picture, which is an image of a tree bark? Can you see the moth in that photo? Here, let me help. There's a moth right there in that circle. Could you see it before? Not only are they masters of camouflage, but they're also transformers. Some are born as larvae, like caterpillars, and then they make their own little structure and they liquefy their entire insides and then put themselves back together and emerge as a whole new insect, like butterflies. And what about cicadas? Did you guys get to see any of our brood X cicadas that only emerge once every 17 years? This was a year for our brood X cicadas to emerge. And these guys spend 17 years underground, living and crawling around and eating as much as they can. So in that 17th year, they can emerge to find a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And what's even cooler about the fact that they could live underground for 17 years is that when they are adults, they don't have to eat. That's right, they don't eat at all. They actually keep their stomachs empty so they can fill it up with air. And once it's filled with air, they then push out this air through little tiny holes throughout their body. And that is the sound that we hear out at night in the warm summer months when cicadas have emerged. And there's not just brood X, there are different broods of cicadas that emerge every single year. There's a 13-year and the annuals that come out every single year. You might be more familiar with those green guys, cicadas, than this black-eyed cicada that I have in the image here. I'm sorry, the red-eyed. And how could we have a talk about insects and bees without bee beards? Yes, incredible bee beards. These images were not photoshopped. They are real. These are people with live bees crawling all over them willingly. Well, mostly. The way you actually make a bee beard is you find the queen amongst thousands of other bees, and then you put her against your neck. Sometimes you can put her in a little cage. And when all the other honeybees in her home, in her hive there, find out that she's not there, they all find her. And they will go and swarm around wherever she is. And that's how we get these fabulous photos that we have here. Don't worry, ladies can have beards too. So when I'm not out in the fields researching my honeybees, I often find other fun things to do with bees, and I stay pretty busy with these busy bees. In the top photo on the left-hand side, you can see what a hive looks like when you open up that box. Those are thousands of bees that are all busy at work, working on cleaning the hive, depositing their nectar to produce honey. Perhaps they're taking care of their young and cleaning it or caring for the queen. At the bottom of the slide there, you'll see a bucket, a round circle of gold little specks. That's actually a swarm. Right before a swarm of bees collected around a peach tree. And we needed that peach tree. We needed to work around it. So I brought this bucket out and I gathered the swarm of bees into the bucket. So that way I could relocate them into a nice, safe new home, like the one that we talked about on the upper left side there. Now, what happens to all that honey that they produce? sure, they need that a good amount of honey that they make. They use that to sustain their young, and all the adults feed off of that nectar and the pollen, the honey, throughout the winter months when there's no other flowers available for them. But oftentimes they make more than enough honey. So we take the extra honey from the honeybees, making sure that the bees in the colonies all have enough food to last them through the winter when they have no flowers. But we have to extract that honey that we take from them. So that's when I like to call in my friends and family to come help out for a nice, fun day, sticky fun day of honey extraction. And you can see what a honey extraction day looks like in my life in the center photo there, where we have a nice tall bucket there that we put in all of our frames of honey, and then we spin it really hard, and that spinning force shoots the honey out to the sides that collects along that metal wall, and then the honey slowly falls to the bottom, where then we can collect it in bottles to use in our tea and on our breakfast. And on the right-hand side, you'll see two images that show, that tell just a piece of the story of an opportunity that I had to partake in the great pollination migration. Yes, I had the opportunity to drive all the way down to Florida to an orange grove where I picked up honeybee hives. I loaded them onto my trailer, and then I drove them straight back all the way up to New Jersey with only stopping for gas. And that's when I took that photo down on the right. I was at a gas station, and needless to say, there weren't too many people that were very close to me that were interested enough and willing to get stung. But no one got stung on this trip, and it was a success. All the bees made it to New Jersey just in time to pollinate our blueberries. So why do we care? I've talked about scientists that are all working on pollination, on pollinators and honeybee health, and all the work that's being done to protect them. Why do we care? Well, there was a really interesting study that came out actually over in Europe just last year. And they did a study where they wanted to see how important pollination was and how much we actually needed our insect pollinators, our bees. So what they did is they had 3 different treatments in a single experiment, where they had strawberries, and the strawberries had flowers that were open and ready to pollinate. Now, these flowers were pollinated one of 3 different ways. There was a by hand method, where someone came out on their hands and knees and got really close and comfortable with those flowers, and they took a tiny paintbrush and painted pollen on each one of those flowers to ensure that the flower was pollinated to the extent in which it needed. That took a whole lot of work. The next one is that they just left the flowers be, and they let pollinators come in, like bees, honeybees, and butterflies, all types of insects come in to pollinate these flowers. And then the third way is they actually covered the flowers with a screen mesh type netting that prevented any type of pollinators to pollinate those strawberries. And then we have the results here of what those strawberries looked like once they were fully grown. And you'll see on the far left-hand side, that was done, that strawberry was created by hand pollinating that flower. The middle strawberry, that was done by our bees and wild pollinators that came about just doing their thing, collecting their pollen for their own young, and in turn, they end up pollinating those flowers for us. And that looks like a pretty delicious strawberry, if you ask me. But on the right, the self-pollinating flowers, the ones that were covered up, where no pollinators were actually able to get in there to help with the pollination, that doesn't really look like a strawberry to me, at least not one that I would be interested in eating. So I thought this study would be really fun to share, to show just how important it is to have these insect pollinators in general, and how important it is for our fruits and our vegetables to have good, tasty food at our home and in our grocery stores. So with my PhD and the work that I'll continue to be doing and I dedicate my life to is I'm following honeybee hives that actually pollinate our crops. And I'm taking loads of data and recording different types of symptoms, good and bad symptoms that I'm seeing while pollinating these crops. I'm collecting the pollen that those honeybees collect. I collect it and then I'm send it out to see what types of pesticides might be in there. And if there are pesticides in there, in the lab, I then try to recreate that same combination of food that those honeybee babies, the larvae, would be fed to see if that pesticide might be responsible for the declines that we're seeing. Now, if you like insects and you're as excited about this talk as I am giving this talk, then feel free to ask your parents if you can raise your own critter crawlers. So there's ant farms that you can find on Google. There are aqua dragons or sea monkeys. You can raise triops and a triopolis. Or you can ask your parents if you could join the your local beekeepers club. Most states have beekeepers clubs and would be happy to let you guys come into their hives and check out what their bees are up to. Now, what can you do? That's one of the most common questions I get after one of these talks. And I think a very important thing that you could do is become a citizen scientist. Now, there are lots of organizations out there, and I'm highlighting just a few of those, but feel free to do your own Google searches and finding your own organization that's right for you and helping to become a citizen scientist. And what citizen scientist means is that you're actually given all the tools that you need to go out into the wild, to nature, and collect data, which is then used for science to help protect and understand what's going on with all of the insects in our world. So there's the Great Sunflower Project, and they actually focus on all pollinators. There's the Firefly Watch Community Science Project. And they're focusing specifically on fireflies, also known as lightning bugs. And they're trying to figure out what is causing declines in their population and perhaps where they might be located where they didn't originally think they could be. There's the Lost Ladybug Project, which actually came out of Cornell University in New York, where their state insect was a 9-spotted ladybug. And over the years, they've seen a huge decline of this ladybug, and they are trying to understand why. Where did it go? What has happened to it? Is it living somewhere else? And so you don't have to be in New York to do this ladybug project or any of these. They're actually just like the image in the bottom right-hand photo of the slide here. Those are images from that ladybug project and showing how far west that 9-spotted ladybug has gone and has been seen and reported by citizen scientists just like yourself. And there's a monarch watch. So our monarch butterflies, their populations have been on declines as well. And you can get involved and help our pollinators by joining this organization, among others, and just kind of following what they recommend that you do. Some organizations will actually send you seeds, which are specific to that type of pollinator or insect to help their population thrive. And I know that the Monarch Watch does that with milkweed. I'm not sure if the window's still open for this summer season. So if it's closed, definitely keep an eye out for it next year. And you could start growing your own milkweed and see monarch butterflies in your backyard. That's not all. There's other organizations that you can join to make a difference as well. One really interesting one that I've come across and I'm actually following myself is called Earthwatch. Now, Earthwatch is where you can really make a vacation count. So in Earthwatch, you go to earthwatch.org, you can find all these different types of scientific expeditions where real scientists are going out and asking for volunteers to come and help them collect data on all the important things that are affecting our world and our climate. So they do some work with pollinators and bees. They also do stuff with the ocean, Antarctica. So there are a whole range of different expeditions that you can get involved in. Talk to your parents and check it out at earthwatch.org and see if you can make one of these destinations your next vacation. All right. Now, before this talk comes to an end, I would like to announce the coloring contest winner. We did have a contest out for who could color and create the most beautiful artwork of a bee. And the results came in. These images are all beautiful and unique in their own ways. And it was a really hard decision to pick the winner. And yes, the winner will get a prize. We'll reach out to you after the presentation here today. And I just want to thank all of you for contributing and submitting your coloring pages to our organization here. And keep up the hard work. But without further ado, the winner of the coloring contest is our 6-year-old Liam. Wonderful job, Liam. Two things really stood out to me the most about this picture. First was the background. You really put in the extra effort to make a beautiful background. And the second thing is the flower at the bottom of your photo there. And that's ultimately what won my heart and made me decide and pick Liam as the winner, is because without flowers, we would not have bees. So good job, Liam. Nice work. And thank you everyone else who submitted your coloring photos. Good work, keep it up. All right, and before I get to the questions and answers portion of this presentation, I would like to make a special shout out to the Rutgers Alumni Association for putting together this presentation. You guys have been wonderful, and this is such an awesome resource for our alumni, our friends, our family, and for children all around to enjoy. If you're a Rutgers alumni, feel free to go onto their website and check out other things that you can do to get involved. And for my final thing, I would just like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank everyone here for tuning in, for participating, and for making this presentation what it is today. Thank you. With that, I'll take questions. Let me see if I can get my chat up here. There we are. So if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and enter them into the Q&A section in the chat. So our first question is, why do bees sting? So there are two answers to this. The first one is accidental. I was that child running around barefoot when I was little, and oftentimes I would get stung just from stepping on them, accidentally squishing the stinger into me. So there are accidental stings, but more often than not, bees will sting to protect their hive and other resources like their food. So they will sting to protect their nesting site, because we're not just talking about honeybees here. There are lots of solitary bees that will live in the ground or in trees or in rotting wood, perhaps. So if they find an animal, including human, that seems to be possibly threatening, that might hurt their young, they will sting to protect their nest, just like Mama Bear will protect her cubs. Great question. How can you tell which bee is the queen? Ooh, good question. So let's scroll back through here to one of our slides that has a queen in there. Oh, there she is. All right, so now this is not an actual size, but the proportions are about right. The queen is the one that you see with her booty, her abdomen inside the cell on the left-hand side. That's the queen. She's got this great big long butt, also called the abdomen. And that abdomen is really big because it stores all of the eggs that she needs to be laying. So the way that you can find the queen is by looking for a bee that has a really long booty. I often like to say that she looks a little bit more like a roach than she does a honeybee, because her abdomen is just so long that her wings look really small and teeny compared to that abdomen. Awesome question. And finding the queen is often very difficult. It's not an easy task. Sometimes it can take me 5 to 10 minutes going through a hive trying to find a queen, especially if she's a sneaky gal who likes to hide in cracks and crevices. All right, moving on to our next question. We have, I love almost all bugs, but mosquitoes are the bane of my existence. I can relate to that. Do you know how we can go about controlling certain bug populations, like mosquitoes, while not harming the bugs we want, like bees? That's a fantastic question, and I'm so happy I have the opportunity to answer it while others are listening. So mosquitoes actually need water to reproduce. So oftentimes people think, oh, they need water like swimming pools or running water. No, they actually need stagnant water. So things that you wouldn't actually realize in your yard could actually be the breeding grounds and contributing to huge populations of mosquitoes in your area. Some popular things are like old tires, bird baths that aren't rinsed out daily. And let's see, if you have like small buckets or flower pots where the water drainage is not adequate and that water sits there for a couple of days, that's all a mosquito needs to grow its population, to lay its eggs and have them become adults in just no time. So making sure that you don't have breeding grounds for mosquitoes is really the number one way that you can help to reduce the mosquito populations without harming our beneficial insects. There's other things such as citronella plants, marigolds. There's other types of plants that have a natural repellency to mosquitoes. There's citronella candles and other various holistic ways to kind of deter insects, make them not want to be around you. And you can use those safely without hurting our good bugs like these. Great question, thank you. Do any crops kill bees? Ooh, well, that's a fantastic question. And it's a bit of a sticky one there. So using the word crops, specifically crops, I would say no. There are no plants out there that just by themselves are killing bees. But there are plants that have the ability, like a superpower, to produce certain things that can kill insects and make it so insects don't want to eat them. And there are things that are done to crops, like spraying pesticides and tilling up the soil that can actually kill and hurt our bee populations. Awesome. These are fantastic questions. Next one is, what is the difference between honeybees and bumblebees? Fantastic question. So bumblebees are much bigger. They're in the bombus group of, or family of the honeybee of bees. So bumblebees are big. They're usually have a lot more black, and they can be shiny and furry. But typically they're much bigger in comparison to a honeybee, where a honeybee is, let's say a bumblebee is about the size of my thumb here. Well, a honeybee is about the tip of my finger. So a honeybee could actually jump on the back of a bumblebee and go for a ride if they were friends, and they both gave consent, of course. Yeah, so I think that just the size alone is the easiest way to tell the difference between honeybees and bumblebees. Honeybees, you'll also see they have these little pollen baskets where when they're on a flower, they have these little tiny hairs that collect the pollen, and the honeybees will groom themselves nice and clean, and they don't want to waste that pollen because they actually eat it and they feed it to their young. So they'll stick all that pollen together and then they put it right on their legs, kind of like pockets. And a lot of times you can see honeybees flying around with these brightly orange or yellow or even some shades of red or purple baskets, pockets, or like pants hanging off the sides of their back legs. So if you see those pollen baskets on the back legs of a bee, then you have a pretty good chance of being looking at a honeybee right there. And while bumblebees, their pollen is collected on all the fur around them. They don't necessarily pack it down and put it on their legs. They have enough fur, and they're big enough to where they'll have plenty of pollen just sticking to them. Next one is, I'm looking for a praying mantis for my insect collection this year. Do you know where I should look for them? Ooh, first off, I'm so excited to hear that you have an insect collection. That's wonderful. So I'm not sure where you're located, but I can tell you here in New Jersey that the praying mantids that have emerged this year, they're still pretty small, so they're going to be a little bit harder to find. The few that I've seen, they're about 1 inch to 2 inches long. So you're just going to start seeing them now. And as the summer progresses, they're going to be bigger and a lot more obvious to spot. Now, these praying mantids are predators, so they're going to be looking for other insects. So oftentimes you'll find them in areas where pollinators might be hanging out on a tree branch. I actually found one on my curtains inside. One somehow maybe hitchhiked away inside on one of the animals and crawled up onto a curtain to see if he could catch any flies that might have been buzzing around inside. Yeah, so just keep your eye out looking for those praying mantids, and don't give up. The longer it takes, the bigger they'll be and the easier they'll be to find. Definitely. Great question. And good luck with your insect collection. Absolutely. And there was just one other thing that I thought of, and I should have thought of putting a slide in there. And it's something that I just learned recently, is that that honeybees actually have a kind of like static electricity almost. And the pollen of flowers oftentimes has the opposite charge. So when a bee flies across a flower without even touching, they can actually attract, like a magnet, pollen from without even landing on a flower. And I thought that was like really interesting and like cool to know. All right, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. I want to thank everybody for participating. Thank you so much for your wonderful artwork that you submitted for the contest, and thank you for the fabulous questions. You guys were wonderful. And if you missed part of this and didn't get a chance to hear it all or want to share it with a friend, this is recorded and it'll be on YouTube soon. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye. Happy pollinating.